of the views and what, from my side, what EBRD and how we look at and what we do in terms of promoting entrepreneurship in our region, but also from your side on where you see organizations like EBRD input and importance in promoting this agenda. So very briefly, I'm going to cover the strategic priorities of EBRD, and in particular the team that I'm representing, which is called Gender and Economic Inclusion Team. I will then outline the offer of EBRD in terms of financing and advisory services for entrepreneurs, and then I will show a couple of case studies from our programs that can spur your interest further. You can check all of the information on our website, which is the ebrd.com, and I'm available. I will stop after each of the section in case you would like to have any follow-up questions, clarifications, or anything that is of interest. Now, first, starting with the strategic priorities on the EBRD in the gender economic inequality of opportunity. Before then, I just wanted to I would like to ask a show of hands on how many of you have heard of the EBRD, have come across EBRD in your personal, professional lives. But I understand that the Zoom format, unfortunately, doesn't really allow for that. So in the EBRD, we're a multilateral development bank. We are owned by 69 countries and 2 international organizations, EIB and European Union. Turkey, which I understand that a few of you are from Turkey, is one of the countries and actually the largest country of operation of the EBRD. So this slide shows you the geography that is covered by the EBRDs, which we call sort of from Mongolia in the east to Morocco in the west. And as I said, Turkey is the largest country, closely followed by Egypt, which is our newest region. This is what we call SEMED, Southeast Mediterranean region. Currently constitutes 6 countries of Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Tunisia, Lebanon, and we also cover West Bank, Gaza territory. So the team that I'm representing, which is the Gender and Economic Inclusion team, is attributing or helping EBRD's mission to promote the countries of our region to transit to sustainable, inclusive market economies that ensure that all of the population group, regardless of their characteristics of birth, like gender, age, geographic location, the origin of their parents, or the socioeconomic situation of their parents, have fair and full access to labor market, finance, and equal economic opportunity. So on this slide, you can see that some of our sort of obvious or the largest target groups that we adhered whose needs were addressed to, which are women, young people population in the less economically developed regions, as well as the other groups like people with disabilities, elderly population, ethnic minority. And the way we organize in the Gender and Economic Inclusion team is by sort of 3 A's. I represent the A, which is access to entrepreneurship and finance, which is the middle one. 2 of my colleagues, supported by the teams, address access to employment and skills, as well as services and gender mainstreaming. So here is the strategic context of the EBRD in terms of the gender and economic inclusion. We are in the process of renewing our strategy for promotion to gender equality. This will be our 3rd, I believe, strategy that we're currently developing. The previous strategy has lapsed last year. And in the following up slide, I will tell you the sort of mega trends that we are looking at in terms of the promotion of the gender equality. We are also finalizing this year the strategy for the economic inclusion. So this was the first strategy that was launched in 2017, which defines and operationalizes inclusive transition as one of the 6 transition qualities of the EBRD, which focuses on the creation of the transition impacts through projects and policy activities that enhance economic inclusion of the target groups that we looked at previously. And when we say about 6 transition quality, inclusive is one of the 6. As the developmental bank, all of our investment projects have to address one of the 6 transition qualities, and inclusive is one of them. So that's just to put it in the overall sort of EBRD's mandate context. And this is the sort of the mega trends from the current 2 strategies that our team is leading on. One of them on the equality of opportunity, and the other one is on the promotion of gender equality. And the mega trends that we have identified, as you can see on this slide, the climate change and the climate adaptation, obviously the digitalization, the future of work, regional disparities, urbanization and migration, and the effect on the target groups, as well as on the promotion of the gender equality. We're looking at the social norms and biases, structural barriers, large-scale shocks that enhance inequalities of some groups, and predominantly women, is disproportionately affected, but also youth and underdeveloped regions. And all of this addressed by our broadened focus of the inequality of opportunity. This year, we're also going through the 2nd year, obviously, of pandemic, and we have identified this sort of the effect of the disproportionate effect of the COVID-19 on the particular subgroups. And on this slide, you could see the differentiated impacts of the pandemic on women and on youth, as well as the other marginal subgroups. I think that you've all witnessed that through your personal and professional experiences, that women have been disproportionately affected. Women are dropping out of the formal employment by a much higher rate than men. A lot of it is just the nature of works, jobs that women are occupying, but also to a certain extent the sort of disproportionate or increased care, domestic work and responsibilities have pulled or made women's decision to drop out of the employment. And that's sort of also globally, women make up 70% of the health and social care workforce that are obviously on the front line. That makes women more vulnerable to the infection. And the rates are up to 3 times higher among the female frontline workers than men. It also has contributed to the increased poverty and the income erosion of women. As you can see, 435 million women and girls are now living on less than $1.9 a day, including 47 million that are pushed into the poverty due to pandemics, and female-owned businesses, and something that is very sort of, we witness a lot in our region, 5.9 percentage point more likely to have closed down than male-owned businesses. Again, that's the nature of the enterprises that are led by and managed by women in the sectors that tend to be on the front line of the pandemics and have been closed down and affected by the lockdowns and quarantine much more than men managed businesses. And the last thing is the time poverty that I have already talked about, and what we have, and that's across the world, universal, that women are bearing the disproportionate care of domestic and the looking after kids and the elderly and sick people. And even in the household, it was the recent study that was done in UK, even in the household where women are earning more than men, women are still carrying the burden, the bulk of the burden of the domestic care. Also, young people, and a lot of you, I believe, are young by the EBRD's definition of youth. It's less than 35 years old. Young people have also been affected, not just by their education and training, but also in their labor markets. I think we all heard about the phenomena last in, first out, that 50% of young people stopped working, 40% of young people reported to have a reduced income. All of that will have a scarring effect and will carry on sort of on the sort of lives of the young people. And very importantly, the mental health, globally 1 in 2 young people possibly suffering from anxiety, depression. 38% of young people are uncertain, 16% are fearful about their future career prospects. I believe, and it's true not just for people who leaving the schools, but also for people who graduating from universities. It's taking them longer to find the prospective employer, and all of that obviously accumulates and might have an effect further into their professional lives and carry over. We're also looking at the effect of the regions, and regions not just between the countries and the inequality between the countries, but also within the country. We all know the rising sort of attention by the world leaders and economists on the inequality between the countries. And pandemic has also highlighted the discrepancies. As we can see, the richer countries have had easier access to the vaccines compared to the developing countries. But there's also an increased inequality within the countries and the regions within the countries. And on this slide, you can see that within Southern and Eastern Europe have borne the brunt, having seen the greater increase of both poverty and inequalities than the Northern and Central Europe. And then the phenomena of the stranded skills. You probably heard the term of stranded assets when we're talking about the sort of decommissioning of the brown or dark brown assets like the coal production. But we've applied this term to the skills that become stranded, and people whose skills become less of a demand in the industries like transportation, retail, tourism, hospitalities that are struggling to remain economically viable. But also with the effect of the digitalization of the technologies that is automating a lot of functions that used to be occupied by humans, and therefore there is present a risk of making people's skills less demanded and contribute to unemployment. This, I think, is the end of the strategic context of what we're currently doing as the EBRD. And maybe at this point, I will pause and see if we have any questions or comments. Anyone has had any previous experience with the EBRD? Okay, in this case, we can move to the second part of the presentation, which is the EBRD's current activities in the access to finance, and in particular for the entrepreneurs. So, creating value added through the EBRD's investments and overcoming business challenges together. So how are we working with our clients in the 38 territories that EBRD operating? Well, first of all, we do have the unique model where we do have the footprint on the ground in most of our countries of operations. We have the resident offices, and in a few larger countries, we have more than one office on the ground. So we keep very close dialogue with our clients, and the supporting ecosystem and of course the government, where we promote the conducive and enabling environment for the entrepreneurs. So we're working with the clients to identify their business challenges. That can be done within the conversation as part of the due diligence when EBRD is talking to the clients and sort of reviewing all part of their business, starting with the governance, the financial situation, as well as the practices, HR practices and policies. So we are working with the clients to enhance their workforce diversity and to help them access new markets and access to the target groups. Then we are, once we have identified the challenges and understand the business and the challenges that it's going through, we are helping them jointly to develop tailored solutions to address those challenges. For example, developing and expanding their trainings, introducing the Equal Opportunity Action Plan to identify the roadmap to attracting the workforce diversity or accessing new markets. And we help them design the new products and services. And we do that all with our sort of inclusion and gender lens, in providing and creating skills and jobs, in providing access to entrepreneurship or access to key services. We always have in mind the impact that our investments or our capacity building, training, and the policy dialogue have on our target or underrepresented groups. This next few slides talk about our flagship Women in Business program, which was created in a holistic manner in 2014, and it was the first and still the largest program in Turkey. It's called Turkey Women in Business program. The program in Turkey is currently going through the second phase of expansion. There will be the slide, but maybe I can mention here that we have so far allocated 300 million euros through 5 major commercial banks in Turkey. And the second phase, which we have just launched earlier this year, was a signing of additional Deniz Bank in Turkey, which is 600 million euros. The flagship Women in Business program is an integrated and holistic way of addressing the needs of the female entrepreneurs. And it does that by recognizing that women are 20% less likely than men to have borrowed formally from the financial institution like commercial banks, that there's enough evidence and data to suggest that women are an attractive segment for the banks, not just because of their higher repayments and the higher loyalty to the bank, but also their cross-selling capabilities, because women command 70% of their budget, family budget, I think, across the world on average. And they also have the distinct needs, priorities in their circumstances, linked to the life cycle events, their sort of innate risk-taking perception or ability or appetite compared to men, but as well as the savings and the overall needs of the families. So this is how we address the need, and these are the sort of the building blocks of our Women in Business program that consists of financing through the we call it dedicated because the financing that EBRD provides to the commercial banks or financial intermediaries in Turkey they have an obligation to on-lend those financing, 100% of that financing, and sometimes they're adding their own financing to the EBRD financing to women-led SMEs. And this is prescribed in the legal documents in the policy statement that defines the target groups, in this case, women-led SMEs. EBRD also provides the risk mitigation instruments that are often funded by the donors in order to help the financial institution go around and address the barriers and externalities that women-led SMEs face, primarily with the lack of the assets that can be used by the commercial banks as a collateral. So the donors, they provide the what we call first loss risk cushion to the financial institution against the portfolio that those financial institutions acquire to the women-led SMEs. We also match that with the technical assistance to the local banks. And that technical assistance, if you remember my previous slides, is to do with the helping the clients address the specific needs of the women-led SMEs, develop the targeted marketing campaign or communication campaign, or adjust their products, financial products, to the needs of the women entrepreneurs. For example, reduce the collateral requirements for hard assets. So then I think that's the financing bit. We also top it up with the know-how to the final entrepreneurs, to the final beneficiaries, which are women-led SMEs. And that we do by providing them with the access to know-how through trainings, skill developments, bespoke advisory services, as well as the network building opportunities. A lot of time we work on the ground with the local women business association, with the local accelerator programs, with the initiatives promulgated by the national governments, the chambers of commerce. We have a very active network of ecosystem players. And finally, in 2019, we have augmented the program with the policy and advocacy. And this is something that is led by the Gender and Economic Inclusion team, where we're working with all of the national stakeholders in order to create the enabling environment for women entrepreneurs and remove the existing barriers. And we do that through a holistic, what we call gender responsive investment climate assessments, through the introduction of the special tools of gender responsive regulatory impact assessment, whereby we're looking at the effect of each of the regulation normative act that is being adopted in the country on the women entrepreneurs. But we're also looking at the evidence-based policies and the presence of the unified definition of the women-led SMEs, as well as the ability of the policymakers to understand the statistics and on a sex disaggregated basis. So we're working with a few central banks in our region to introduce the sex disaggregated SME reporting by the financial institutions. So this slide talks about the support that we're offering, advisory support to the women-led SMEs under our Women in Business program. As I already mentioned, this is business advised. This is heavily subsidized by our donors who cover the cost of the advisory services. The advisory services are offered by the trained local consultants that have gone through the EBRD training and the certification and are based on the ground. They all speak the local language, and they offer sort of very comprehensive and hands-on assistance to the businesses. So you can see the statistics of how many business advisory projects were started under the Women in Business program, and the areas, the wide areas. This is not a comprehensive list, but it gives you an idea of what are the areas of support that women-led SMEs benefiting under this program. As I said, this is all started in 2014 in Turkey with the credit lines amounting 300 million euros, with the first loss risk cushion or risk mitigated instrument that was supported by EU with the technical assistance to 5 major banks of Turkey. Those of you from Turkey would recognize all of the, obviously, the names. That was then lent to 17,500 women-led SMEs. They resulted in 2,500 business lens seminars, and the advice to women in business, 342, and the opportunities created to those women-led SMEs, as well as the capacity built by the 5 PFIs in order to create a sort of a business segment of women-led SMEs. So this is the second sort of the graphic representation of the second phase of the Women in Business in Turkey. And it's worth noting here that instead of relying on the European Union, which is our largest donor across the regions, we have replaced or substituted the donor-funded first loss risk cushion by the risk mitigating loss cover provided by the Turkish Credit Guarantee Fund. So we're using the existing mechanism of Turkish Treasury supported Credit Guarantee Fund in order to accelerate the lending by the financial institutions, or what we call them PFIs, to the final beneficiaries, which are women-led SMEs. So the risk mitigating instrument, the first loss risk cover provided by the Turkish Credit Guarantee Fund, underwrites the losses, potential losses of the commercial banks under the Women in Business program. So you could see here that EBRD is committed to provide 600 million euros to commercial banks, who will then on-lend those funding to the women-led SMEs that will meet the criteria identified and will create a specific products, financing products for those women. So this is a snapshot of the Women in Business program and the 24 countries where it's currently operated. Our latest extension of the program was earlier this year during the International Women's Day to the new territory, which is West Bank, Gaza. And obviously Turkey is the largest program, but there are other territories like where what we call gender gaps are quite pronounced, like Lebanon, that we would like to expand the program this year, and Jordan. So then we have used the Women in Business model to create the Youth in Business program, and that was piloted in Egypt, as you can see on this slide, in 2019. So you can recognize the 4 building blocks here because they are almost one-for-one for women in business, except that the target group under the Youth in Business program is youth managed and youth owned SMEs. So when we say SMEs, small medium enterprise, will follow the European Union's definition of SMEs, which are actually quite generous because it goes up to 250 employees and up to 15 million euros into turnover, annual turnover. But we have substituted women with youth. And as I mentioned already, the definition of youth is the SME that is managed or owned by a person who is 35 years, under 35 years or younger, with the financing from EBRD to the commercial banks in the amount of $120 million. And the first project was approved in 2019 and is currently under the implementation with the largest state-owned bank in Egypt, which is called National Bank of Egypt. Then you can see that there is a first loss risk cushion towards the PFIs or financial institution to cover the losses under this portfolio. And again, there's an advisory services or capacity building activities targeting the youth entrepreneurs and that facilitate and increase access to know-how and non-financial services for young businesses. And here is an example of what type of assistance that may entail, like digital training and mentoring, access to the markets through networking opportunities. What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to address the challenges of the youth unemployment in the region in here, Egypt in particular. We also know that Turkey has its challenging with youth unemployment. So the program is aimed to create a route to employment for young people, attract migrants back to their home country by creating the economic opportunities for them to start up their business and develop the youth skill and address skill mismatches at the SME level. I can see that there is a question, which I sort of apologize I missed, which was on the Women Business Program. So I think this is the last slide in this section, and maybe we can then break up for to address the questions. So as I said, the digitalization is one of the megatrend identified in our two new strategies that we're currently working on, but also is one of the three strategic cross-cutting themes of the EBRD. So the inequality of opportunities, the one that our team is leading on, the other two being the green, and in the green, EBRD has made a commitment that half of its investments will be green, and digitalization, where we currently developing our first digitalization approach as an institution. So we also think that digitalization technology presents a unique opportunity to inclusive ecosystems, and in particular, the digital infrastructure like broadband, cloud hosting, and digital payments can make it easier for target groups to be integrated and to have the economic opportunities. Also to financing, we know that the impact of fintech and technologies or challenging banks to increase financial inclusion, human capital, as well as the policy of regulation. So we're looking at all of those components in our current strategies in order to deploy them for the creation of the economic opportunities to our target group, but also mitigate them in order to manage the risks that do occur with the digital technologies. So we're looking here at investing in connectivity and other digital infrastructure. We do know that women and young people have less access to gadgets. In most of the countries where EBRD operates, they have less access to the internet and using internet less than men. We also trying to promote the responsible application as a use of technologies through policy and regulation, investing in frontier digital products and services, or in the companies that provide them, or in the services that disproportionately address the needs or benefit the needs of the vulnerable groups, as well as the accelerating the digital skills. And that tends to be the sort of the lack of digital skills is the second, I think, largest barrier to digital access, after the access to connectivity. And we're trying to do that with the support of the private sector in digital transformation, and to work with the regulator and policymakers in mitigating the risks that arise from the use of the technology. And in particular, when it comes to equality of opportunity, the entrenching or embedding of the inequalities in the AI and in the algorithm, and there have been enough evidence of that, including some of the racial, ethnic, with the face recognition, with the sound recognition technologies. I think we're trying to see that no one is left behind with the use of the algorithms. So maybe we will pause for questions, and I'll try to, before we switch to the non-financial services that EBRD is providing to the entrepreneurs, and I'll try to maybe read the question. The link to the criteria, I will have to, as I said, Anu, I assume that this is for our women in business and youth in business. We haven't got the link in the presentation, but I will follow up with Ece and send the criteria, which is the SME criteria of the European Union, which is available. but also the women-led criteria, which is specific for women in business program, and youth-led and youth-managed criteria. So with the startups, maybe we can delay this question until after the third section, but all I can say is that the programs that I have presented in the previous slides, women in business and youth in business, they are working through the commercial banks. So we at in the policy statement of the EBRD, we do not limit the usage of the program or financing to startups. Startups are included, but obviously each of the banks have a certain risk appetite towards the startup, and also the startup definition varies from country to country. So this is a conversation that we are encouraging the financial institution to lend to all types of enterprises, particularly to those ones who never had an access to the formal financial system. And in fact, there is the indicator that we are introducing in our financing agreement with the banks that tracks the number and asks for a minimum amount of the financing to go to the and those enterprises that have never benefited from the bank's loan. But EBRD does not interfere in the this is a portfolio-based approach through the financial intermediary. So we do not interfere in the risk appetite of the bank, other than creating them with the positive incentives in the form of the risk mitigating instruments in order for the banks to have a higher appetite to those or higher risk taking to the startups. The sectors, there are no priority sectors. All of the programs that I have talked about, women in business and youth in business, they go across the sector. We do have an exclusion list, obviously, as the multilateral development bank, that we would not touch some sectors like production of the arms, harming the endangered species, production of the hard liquor. So we do have our exclusion list that is on our environmental social policies guide, which again, I'm happy to share. But otherwise, in those programs, there is no priority region. We do have the specific program for SME, and I understand that a lot of you are interested in the digital agriculture. We used to have this the agribusiness financing facility, including in Turkey in the early years. We still have a program for agriculture and tourism in some of the countries, but per se, none of those sectors are excluded. So if you're interested in a particular sector, you can discuss that on the Women in Business or Youth in Business program. So yes, so the next question on the financing, the programs that I have presented are through the financial institutions, leasing companies. The next deck of slides will talk about some of the direct SMEs and startups, but also we do have the equity funds. EBRD invests in the private equity funds that also touch on that provide the equity financing to the entrepreneurs in our region. Yeah, so the definition will make women is what they seem focused on. Get female co-founders. So our guiding principle for women-led SMEs are managerial responsibility. It can be mixed with the ownership, but there has to be at least one woman in the key managerial position. Then the next question of the youth qualities under the age of 35. Yeah, Bermuda, unfortunately, is outside of the EBRD's regional remit, but I can only, I believe that IC would cover Bermuda and possibly the Inter-American Development Bank, and they're very actively working. And in fact, that they're ahead of the EBRD in digitalization approach. Julian, if you have any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask it now.
Thanks a lot, Oksana. I'll be brief. I run a company that helps microfinance institutions digitize on their We started actually in Central Asia a few years ago, but we had to give up due to some limitations with regards to the cloud computing, like namely about data residency, which is quite restrictive in Central Asia, as you know. I was just wondering, like, whether the EBRD would like support some technical workaround those issues, and how to address that. Would that be the financial institutions that we equip to contact the EBRD directly? Are there like any specific like grant schemes or innovation relating schemes that they could tap into?
Julian, this is a very interesting. We haven't actually got to in sort of my conversation with the Central Asian regulators. We haven't come across. We're working in Kyrgyzstan very actively. I think we're working with the central bank in terms of, well, we're digitizing the SME registration. That's what we helped, in the collateral registration. And we're also looking at the e-signature and sort of with the Central Bank of Kyrgyzstan. I haven't come across the challenge that you are mentioning on cloud computing residency. But it will be very relevant because we're working with the Uzbek stakeholders on some of our programs that might face this issue. Maybe, Julian, we will have a separate, there will be in the last slides, there will be my contact details. So perhaps we have a team of consultants in Uzbekistan that are working on the Women in Business program. We also have a policy coordinator, which is part of our team, who covers the four countries, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Mongolia. I don't know which country in particular you're interested in, but we'll also work with the microfinance institutions. So I think let's have a follow-up conversation. If you could drop me an email and we'll follow up. We'll be very interested to have this conversation, get to the bottom of the issue, and intertwine it in our policy dialogue.
Thanks a lot. I will definitely reach out to you afterwards.
Thanks a lot. So the next slide, deck of slides talk about the advisory services. EBRD has been sort of from the very, we've just celebrated 30 years of our existence, and the provision of the non-financial services has been in sort of one of the first value proposition for SMEs, and we're quite unique in this case. We've always understand the differentiated, sort of the value of the differentiated approach to the SMEs, and we have included our financial services with the non-financial services. And this slide is sort of a value proposition for entrepreneurs, or the escalator, funding escalator, and it talks about very comprehensively all of our programs, financing programs, starting from the sort of at the bottom was the size of the enterprise, or the life cycle, the evolution of the SMEs, and then as we're going the y-axis, the type of advice and the financing available. So the programs that I spoke about on the Women in Business and Youth in Business, they come under the Financial Intermediated Facility and the abbreviation FIF. Then I mentioned the private equity funds that EBRD invest in, that also that provide equity investments into the enterprises. So that's the PE funds. And here the definition or distinction between the financing ticket of euro 25 million and above is our sort of delegated management approval from the board. So that's the EBRD, so it's very specific. Shouldn't be of much concern to entrepreneurs. And then there is on this sort of escalator of the type of investments. The next one is the Star Venture Fund, which will be the next couple of slides. And there's a new product here, which is called Supply Chain Finance Solution Framework. This is currently what we're working with through the financial institutions. The RSF is the co-financing program with the commercial banks, where EBRD takes the risk of the SMEs, but through the commercial banks. So we risk sharing. So RSF stands for Risk Sharing Facility, whereby EBRD has the framework agreement in Turkey with TSKB Bank. TSKB then lends the funds, its own funds, and takes to the SME, and EBRD co-finances this SME, sort of taking the direct risk of the SME, but relying on the local bank for administration, for origination, for monitoring of the loan. So you're like a silent participant, but with a direct exposure to the SME. BCIP is a fairly new program. We've just extended it to the second phase. This is where EBRD takes a direct risk, equity risk, or mezzanine equity risk in the enterprises, but they have to be on a technological or with a high technological angle. So this is quite a unique framework within the EBRD where we invest directly into the smaller companies, but they have to be with the fintech angle. And DFF SME, this is a direct lending program to the SMEs. This is debt program. And DFF non-SME is going, obviously, as the name suggests, from the SME definition of European Union up to SME, what we call SME Plus, which goes up to 500 employees. And above that, beyond that characteristic of SME Plus, this is standalone, where EBRD takes the sort of standalone risk, meaning without the framework or without the particular program, we just look at the corporate and take this, the assessment of the corporates on a standalone basis and present it to our board. So it's quite a comprehensive, as you can see, value proposition for the SMEs. And then the ASB is advisory services for businesses. And in green, it's a policy investment, policy engagement where we work with the business and investment councils. Most of the time they're seeded by EBRD in our countries of operation. We have a legal transition team that works with the government on a particular pieces of regulation. For example, quite relevant to a lot of you would be the registration of movable collateral, fiscal regulatory environment, and capital market developments. So we have a very active local currency program where we provide the commercial banks with the local currency, long-term local currency on a competitive basis to be on lend to the SMEs. So this is the sum of the sort of a snapshot of our achievements or the impact of our program or the outcomes for the past 3 years. We're obviously very proud of it. One sort of caveat that I'm going to say that this is the outcome of the advisory services. So where EBRD works either directly or indirectly through the national consultant or international advisors with each of the SMEs, and therefore we're able to capture a very specific outcome on those enterprises in each of the case. Where we work through the commercial banks, this is what we call a portfolio approach, there the impact becomes much more blurred. But here we're very proud of the impact of the EBRD advisory services on the turnover, jobs, productivity, and export potential of those SMEs. And I've already touched on the toolbox and how we are expanding it in line with EBRD's 3 cross-cutting strategic priorities, which are green, equality of opportunities, and digital. We're hoping to expand geographically our flagship programs like Women in Business, Youth in Business, and Skills in Business, scaling up our advisory services business, the Star Venture programs, Blue Ribbon, which is for emerging leaders, and this is managed by International Advisory Services, and support of the entrepreneurship in the eligible countries, as well as introducing the new financing instruments like supply chain. We're looking at the impact bonds and the results-based products, And here you can see also we're trying to embed the sustainability inclusiveness in the supply chain, as well as the outcome-based advisory. We're also looking at the outcome-based or linked instruments, whereby the EBRD's margin is linked to the key criteria under the sustainability or social impact. And we're launching the new Enterprise Expansion Fund in Western Balkans. So this again are our three cross-cutting themes for the next 5 years: digital, green, and the inclusive or equality of opportunity. So you recognize our programs that we talked about. Under the green, we're looking at focus on impact, as I mentioned, as an example, sustainability linked bonds, loans, the outcome-based advisory, Paris alignments. There's a big work stream going on towards the Paris alignment of EBRD as an institution, environmental, social governance, ESG diagnostic, capturing and reporting impact, and the further focus on the green products. In terms of digital, again, this is probably it is the newest area. We know that a lot of our advisory, in particular during the last year, has switched to the digital delivery mode. We have established, there will be a slide later on the digital e-learning. We have switched all of our advisory into, including the mentoring, into the digital mode, and working with the SMEs to help them digitalize their business and have access, sort of marketing online, but as also internal processes, switch them to digital. That was the focus of Mustafa activities last year. This is what we last year have introduced as a Knowhow Academy. This is a standalone academy that is free for any entrepreneurs around the world. We have introduced the 5 sort of quick modules of the crisis management to help the enterprises and entrepreneurs to weather the crisis. So it's a very basic 30 minutes modules and free of charge. We've translated them into 5 languages: English, Russian, Arabic, Ukrainian, Turkish. And there is a certificate provided for that. So I would encourage you to check it out. This is sort of available to everyone. Hopefully that will be of use. And the Star Venture program that I have mentioned, where EBRD is providing the advisory support to the high growth potential startups. Together we've teamed up with the Cambridge Industry of Manufacturing Business Diagnostic Institute, so Institute of Manufacturing, that provides the customized advisory services, mentoring to the high potential startups that are identified through the competition in the country. The program currently is running in 6 countries, I believe: Egypt, Jordan, Tunisia, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, Northern Macedonia, and Serbia. And we're currently in the process of extending it to Morocco, Lebanon, Bulgaria, Romania, and potentially Turkey. So this then is, the program is then works on the high potential startups, which and helping them to tap into the equity provided by the other programs, including EBRD equity programs through the regional venture capital funds. So these are the achievements of the program so far. We do have the international advisors and mentors that work with the identified startups, high potential startups, with the local consultants trained. We helped the startups raise $65 million today, and we're working with the partner team partner accelerator in each of the territories where the program is currently active, in order to identify the startups, but also provide them with the support. So maybe we'll take a pause, because the next slides are really the case studies, which I'm very happy for you to browse through and then come back with any questions that you have. I'm just looking at our chat, mindful of the time. So the blue bonds are not yet. There is a blue economy sort of identified, which I know, if I understand, this has to do with the marine ecosystem, right, and the oceans. So we have identified approach, but we haven't issued the bonds, or we haven't sort of come up with the instrument yet. But technically, I would say that yes, we have identified that as a possibility. We have an approach, but just haven't operationalized it yet.
Oksana, I'm going to reach out to you to keep in touch. I'm very interested in this space, especially as it relates to gender and ESG.
With pleasure. So my contact details are on the last slide here. So this is my email address. So I'll be very, very happy to stay in touch and to hear. Maybe I don't know whether we've sort of at our time. If you have any other questions or want to provide your feedback on whether there are any demands or challenges that you are facing in your sort of journey as entrepreneurs as part of the accelerator program, where EBRD could be of particular assistance. Obviously recognizing our geographic limitations, but sort of Ece, I don't know whether you want to call in for someone you know from Turkey.
Not really.
Put anyone on the spot.
We don't have any Turkish startups now.
Okay. Okay, well, maybe we can stop here, and I'll be very happy to share the presentation. And please, Julian, Anu, please, and everyone else, if you have any questions, comments, would like to discuss a particular initiative, we'll be very happy to stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. This has been really insightful. Thanks a lot for your time and all the information.
Very nice meeting you all, and wishing you all the best in your entrepreneurial endeavors. And we'll be very happy to stay in touch and hear about the ways that EBRD can address, help financial and non-financial policy engagements and in any other way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.